Hey everybody, it's Ben. I just finished Pulse by Joseph McElroy. Now, huge shout outs to Big Pappy Bifurcat on Instagram for providing me this book. I really appreciate it. And I had a comment from its YouTube user Ron saying that that's McElroy's most difficult book. But Bifurcat said Woman and Men is magnum opus. This is the most difficult book. So I'm just going to assume that I'm screwed on reading every McElroy book. Now, the plot of Pulse is brain in a jar. It's just about a brain on a space station coming to realize itself and its thought process. Now, the thing about this book is that it's less plot. Oh, there's a plot. It's a small, simple plot, but it's much more thought oriented. And the process of thought, just about how a brain in a jar would discover itself. Now, this was the hardest book I've read this year, so a lot of this review is going to be helping you and giving you some bullet points and just some how to approach this book. Now, the best way to imagine this is that imagine if your brain was taken out and you were made for one singular process, whether that be to make Excel documents, data input, make phone calls. In this case, in the book, it's to calculate the orbit of Earth because it's slowly decreasing, the velocity of it. And all of your humanity, so to say, all of your thought process was designated to that into more of a subconscious implicit state. Much to the same effect of how our breathing, our digestion and everything, it's not something that our mind, we do actively, it's something that we do almost subconsciously, and that our brain does that for us to take attention away from it so we can have other thought processes. But imagine your whole brain and being put into that state. So even though you are living and even though you are thinking and doing these calculations, you're not actually conscious. You're not actually experiencing the world. You're just built for that one specific task. You're almost more of a program than a being. But in being human, imagine now that you start to become alive again. Well, you start to become conscious again, in that you start to experience your world and you start to have a few select memories, but the main bulk of your intelligence and human experiences isn't there. And a lot of things, in like your language, your ability to have language, to name certain things, semiotic abilities, are like almost completely gone into almost a base infantile level, even sub-infantile level. But there are words out there that you still know, but this only pertain to what your scientific purpose is. So, and then also on top of that, before I get to that, you have communications with the ground, which is you only describe the two people by the voice being the acidic voice or bad voice and the good voice. And you have this thing called a dim echo, that it's another like sub-program, subconsciousness that was made from your brain that can help transmit thought, transmit data, transmit your own thoughts to the ground level. However, you also have a slight ability to control it, not directly, but only in like halting some speech from going there. And I think it can also sleep for you. Your linguistic skills are so limited that you don't even know your name, your prior name. Your name in this book would be IMP and then Pulse. There's an acronym for IMP, but I've just blanked on it right now. So that's kind of the function of how this brain sees the world, how Impulse sees the world. And a lot of stuff, like, this is not a book you can read through once and understand everything. I was talking to Bifurcat, and he said that he doesn't think anybody except for McElroy can understand it. And towards the end of the book, I think I seem to agree with him, because there's just some stuff that's intentionally vague, and there's some words that he made up, like Shurut or Fellow Dream or something like that. What are they? He never elaborates. But Impulse knows how to use them in the book, because it's much like how a lot of things in our lexicon we kind of understand and we know how to apply, but if you break down the meaning, you don't know. Like, I've had some I'm near Maricosa, so there's a lot of foreign exchange students. One guy, I said kicking ass and taking names one time, and he's like, yo, what does that mean? And I froze. I had no idea. Like, I know the use of it, I know the connotations and denotations of it, but I didn't know the actual meaning of that and where it came from, the etymology of it. Or another example, I had another Japanese student ask me, what's the difference between wish and hope? and I froze again. I had to really think about it. So a lot of these words, a lot of these scientific definitions for impulse, even though he has trouble classifying basic stuff, he understands these words and he knows these words, but he might not he might understand it on that same level, in that more implicit level that we don't really think about to that degree. So an example is, this is going to be a slight spoiler. In one chapter, he keeps talking about the silver. He keeps seeing the silver. He keeps talking about it throughout the whole chapter, and you're like, dude, what the hell is the silver? I have no idea what he's talking about. And then at the end of the chapter, he says, there are electrodes planted in the brain. And like, oh, cool, okay, I understand that. And you think he's going to do that for every term that he doesn't understand, but no. There's so many terms that he just doesn't explain. And like, he'll talk about like the crimson, and then he'll talk about the arsenic particles, which is like, what the hell? Or he'll even have words that do have meaning, but like have a totally different meaning in this context. Like the lattice being like a structure of like interlapping like metal or wood, or like a bunch of chemicals forming into a crystal. Cool, there's a definition. Lattice in this context, it's almost like some super consciousness where he can pull from, and it's implied that he might be getting absorbed into by the end of the book. I have no idea what the lattice is, and it's almost like a continent island kind of thing too. If somebody got it better than I do, please let me know. But so if you have terms like that, you're not going to get the definition for all these terms. You're not going to understand all of them, especially on a first read, maybe on a second reading. But that also kind of leads to the purpose of the book, and which is where the real genius of McElroy comes into this, where it's like, in a lot of books, sometimes the difficulty might not necessarily match what's going on. Maybe there can be an argument for Ulysses that even though Joyce is trying to capture daily thought, people don't think like that necessarily. And I would say, yeah, true, but two, I would also say you're a doofus, because it's beautiful. And if we took that ideation to like movies, every movie would look like shit and be like 24 hours long. In this book, the difficulty of understanding and trying to even understand what the narrator is talking about, what Impulse is trying to see, really helps you relate to the experience of Impulse, where he doesn't have the proper vernacular to describe all these super sci-fi high-tech things that are going out there. Like, he understands algae, and algae's good, and like it helps regulate his system, but he can't really describe why. He can only describe it in basic terms of particles, potato-shaped beings, or green, or like he keeps seeing these shadow things. You never really get a definition of it, but he keeps seeing the shadows, or like when he's going through different circuitry because he can control the ship, he describes it as a process of seeing yellow, or kind of going through a weird tunnel, but not exactly. So through the process of understanding the book, you're also understanding the process of how Impulse is trying to understand his own world. And it's just such a crazy meta thing that McElroy is doing through those experiences, and it's pretty genius, and it just really helps set what's really going on in the book. Now, I will say there is a high level of frustration with this book. It's the most difficult book I've read this year. It reminds me of the times when I first read Thomas Pynchon or Ulysses, and I'm like, what the hell is happening? And the amazing thing that McElroy does with that, though, at the same time, is that he doesn't use a verbose lexicon. I mean, there's some words in there I had to look up and whatnot, but for the main thing, to describe stuff, he uses very, very basic language. And also, unlike Pynchon or Ulysses, this book is not referential at all, unless there's some weird, obscure references to other works that I just can't catch in it, but it's really insular to Impulse's perception of the world. But that's what also makes it frustrating, because you're not going to get all the answers, and if you're a person who doesn't like all the answers, which you're kind of on the wrong YouTube channel, that's all the books I read, but sometimes it goes a little bit to the point of arbitration, but still for the greater narrative that it's trying to serve, in that you're experiencing the same confusion as a brain on a space station would. I think it's very important. I think it's a very smart way to do it, and I think it's necessary. But I will say, at times this feels more like a puzzle than it does necessarily a story, with a lot of the stuff that he goes through. Now, slight spoilers, near the end of the book, the space station falls out of orbits, and because Impulse is deteriorating like crazy. Like, I guess the solar radiation made a pituitary tumor, and you think you're gonna start understanding the book towards the end of it, you understand less. he starts going on these mad tirades, and he starts jumping from subject to subject, much like a crazy person would in real life. If you've ever spoken to somebody who's not of the soundest mental state, or one time we received a letter at my old office from somebody who had been at the mental state, and you're seeing them jump from subject to subject and with no theme or cohesion, but they think it's all relevant. That's very much what's going on at the end of the story. However, it's done, again, within the context of a pain in a jar. So, what I mean by that is, like, so he's dying, and he's almost, in some ways, having epiphanies at the same time, where he's wondering if he's in, like, I think it was heterograph and autograph, meaning, does he consume other food, or is he able to produce his own? And it seems pretty irrelevant to us, like, dude, who cares, man? Like, how is that important? But if you think about it, what creates our world, what is our most important things to us, kind of appears to us through epiphany. Meaning that before the Bible was created, before the time of Christ, nobody was having epiphanies of the Virgin Mary. But somebody like John Coltrane, for example, who had a near-death experience on the road one time and saw the Virgin Mary, and he claims that she rescued him, having that strong religious background when, and, also a lot of the drugs, but, when that slight deterioration starts to happen, and he has those quote-unquote epiphanies, those images, those symbols are what come to him. So while that might happen to the everyday person, or, when you see a lot of homeless people say they're Jesus, the important things that's happening to Impulse is the glucose levels, is the algae, is the crimson that he's been seeing, all the different voices. So rather than experiencing a religious experience, he is experiencing the important things, the important matters, the important questions that are around him, and that's when he starts to become one with the latest, in a sense, and he starts to become more one with the space station. He even claims that his mind is expanding beyond the station, which is kind of left up in the air, but it's more the mad ramblings of a brain who is suffering from solar radiation and a pituitary tumor. And that's just a crazy level of genius I would have never thought of that McElroy does, in that just replacing all the religious, all the metaphysical, all the philosophy that we have with the systems of a space station to keep your brain alive. Oh, really quick thing, also another point, the book jumps around timelines and memory a lot. Sometimes Impulse gets his memory mixed up with that going on in the real world. That's how basic his thought process is. So he's like moving some solar panels at the outside of a spaceship, but then he's like, but the windmill's not inside, it's inside the spaceship, but it's not actually inside the spaceship, it's in his mind because he's thinking of a windmill. So he'll jump around like that. And if you use the stuff like, authors like Philip Roth and James Joyce, that stuff is not going to be too difficult. The easy parts of this book are the flashbacks, him communicating with the ground. That the tough parts are like the actual trying to realize what's happening around. But there's kind of like 4 timelines. There's the current time where he's happening right now. There's the time where he is with his lover, his wife, and then there's the timeline of, when he's actually getting the surgery, like the needle in his arm and everything, and like when he talks to the Arsyd voice before that, and that kind of jumps around also. There's another timeline too, but I forgot it right now. But like, so you're gonna jump around those timelines a bit, but if you pay attention, if you read another McElroy book, you shouldn't have that much tough time with it. Again, the real difficulty is him trying to actuate his surroundings. Now, I have to say though, even with the amount of frustration, how much of a slow read it was, and there's a lot that I don't think only anybody except for McElroy would understand. This is an amazing book, and it's an amazing accomplishment. I think it's sometimes a bit more of an accomplishment than it actually is a fun read, but the best books I've read haven't always been a fun, kind of like manga style or movie style read where it's just like chapter after chapter of just great stuff. It's the best novels, I feel like, are the ones that you really have to process and put the time and effort into. So that's Pulse by McElroy. I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to be reading a lot more McElroy this year, and if you have any answers to the questions I've been asking, let me know. Put it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about this book and to see if there's anything you picked up on that I might not have done. I know I left some stuff out, like how we see stuff in 4 different angles with the cameras and whatnot. But yeah, just let me know, and